it's me, Imogen, and today I'm going to be talking about The Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham. Unfortunately, I didn't love this book, so this is not going to be an overly positive review as usual. I really wanted to like it, and I went into it expecting to somewhat like it, but unfortunately, by the end, I did not. I have to admit, this is my first by Maugham, and it wasn't really the book I intended to begin with, and I don't think it's really the book you're supposed to begin with. I would still like to read of human bondage, and that's what I really would have rather have begun with, but I just figured I would begin with something shorter in my blindness, but I realised that maybe wasn't the best idea. This book was published in 1944, I believe, so it's sort of an interesting time and not maybe my favourite period to read about in literature. The premise of the novel is something that drew me in. It sounded like most things that I enjoy reading, a little bit philosophical, perhaps spiritual. It's basically about a young American guy who is traumatized after his experience in World War I and is kind of searching for something else in his life, meaning, truth. It's kind of like, I guess, his spiritual awakening in a way. He wants to travel the world and see things and come to his own conclusions, and he wants to read and study and not be tied down by the sort of conventions of the upper class world that he exists in. The book is not only about him though, it's actually about a cast of characters, which is always quite, it's an interesting idea. You have a bunch of different people of the same time period and show the impacts of their own decisions in contrast with each other. In the beginning, Larry is involved with Isabel, a young girl who kind of just wants what everybody else wants. She wants to get married, she wants to have children, she wants to be in love and pursue a nice, comfortable life that society will accept of her and fit into society. She loves Larry, and Larry supposedly does love her in some way, but you can already tell that they're going to clash, and that's kind of where the book launches from in a way. Something I found sort of unusual is that Maugham himself narrates the novel as a character who is in the novel, and he interacts with the characters and is kind of the way into learning what the other characters are thinking, because everybody is like opens himself up to him because he's a writer, as he puts it. I don't know, I think personally I'm not into that. I mean, I love books that are autobiographical. I love books where it's very heavily just what someone else has been through, but put through the lens of fiction with different names added in. I have no problem with that. A lot of my favourite books are like that because they feel so personal and unique, but something about the author being a character and interacting with fictional characters and narrating it from their perspective kind of makes it hard for me to connect, I think. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but it doesn't really work for me. And as a result, kind of ties in with one of the things that I dislike the most about the novel, that kind of really, I mean, I tend to be quite open-minded, and I'm very aware from reading a lot of old literature, relatively old literature, times were very different back then, and so things are not always going to be nice and comfortable and not problematic. They're very problematic a lot of the time, but when the narrator themselves is in the book and they are expressing quite nasty views of that time, it's not the most comfortable to read when you know it's not satirical. At least I'm fairly certain it wasn't. In general, I read a lot of books that, you know, I mean, I have no problem with reading about male stories, as a way to put it. I don't really have nothing that really stops me from reading something based on the identity, sexuality of a character by any means at all. I just like reading and I like literature, and you know, the story of a guy's spiritual journey is always going to be something that's interesting to me. Again, a lot of my favourite books kind of follow that narrative. And so I was disappointed when I found that I didn't really feel like the book was truly about that. There was maybe a passage towards the end, and at that point I was really struggling. That was, I guess, it finally delved into the kind of answers maybe to those questions, but it wasn't very satisfying to me because I didn't feel connected to it from the rest of the book. It sort of feels you spend more time with the narrator and in his thoughts, and I don't particularly care for his thoughts because I didn't find them very interesting. And in a way, I mean, I liked Isabel for a while. I thought she was interesting and I wanted to know what would happen to her, especially after Larry leaves to pursue his unconventional lifestyle and his learning. I wanted to know where that placed her and whether she was going to grow and discover things herself, but she wasn't really, it's not really how it goes, and I found it a little bit reductive. I mean, as there's several characters, it kind of switches between them and involves a lot of just conversation. The book is made of a lot of conversations, which again is something that I enjoy. I like dialogue. I like just experiencing the characters as people and the way they interact with each other and their thoughts on things and discussions. One of my favourite novels is Point Counterpoint by Aldous Huxley, and that's a lot of that, and I think it's amazing and very engaging. But with this, I just didn't experience that at all. I mean, not to compare it to something like that, but just in the sense of characters discussing things and sitting in rooms, it didn't really feel very compelling in this book for me. And now, I mean, it feels like a sort of dreaded topic to talk about. I tend not to hyperfixate on things like this when I'm reading, because a lot of authors I read, I know we're not amazing people when it comes to dealing with, you know, women in general, and I am a woman, and so I'm very conscious of this, but I try to keep an open mind and take the art for what it is and the literature for what it is, and not think, well, this doesn't align with how I view things now, and so I don't like it, unless the text does feel misogynistic. And in this case, I have to say, it did come through in that way for me. Now, I think this book is very well regarded. I don't really know if, I mean, it's not like I hear people talk about Maugham very often these days, other than to praise his, you know, of human bondage or something. It's not even something I can think of what the social sphere views him as nowadays, so I don't know if it's just like me, if it's a common view, but I'll be honest that it did come across that way, which is such a shame, I think. I just felt that the women characters were very, they were written to be sort of insipid and sort of not much depth, and a lot of the times the narrator himself will just make a comment about their stupidity or about them being animals for having their own desires and their own wishes and thoughts, and kind of like just as particularly describing Isabel as just a pretty face and nothing more, and that she's nice to look at, but she's like, you know, there's not much else going on back there, which is awful because, you know, I mean, it's fiction, but that is an image of, you know, any woman maybe from that era or now, and she has a whole world of thoughts, and all the writer can say is that she has a nice face, you know. In contrast, the men are all intelligent and hilarious and interesting, and they're able to be free thinking and have spiritual awakenings. And it's just that I mean, I've read books written from before then, and that wasn't the case. You know, there was more of a balance. You don't need society to tell you whether men and women can have deep thoughts or not. So I just had to say I found it a bit repugnant. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like reading that. And I kind of felt that there wasn't enough to draw me in that could take me away from focusing on that, unfortunately. It's just a bit disappointing. And I mean, it wasn't all that interesting. I mean, it felt like there could be a grand story there, but it felt like so much of it was just being described after the fact. Like a character would do something and then they'd just describe it back to the narrator instead of you actually getting to be in the moment. And when I read, I'm very like into sensory descriptions. I like moments where you can just linger in how the character feels, about their surroundings, about a feeling, just in general, just details. It doesn't have to be, you know, mundane even. I like it, but there was nothing for me to just hold on to with this book. It kind of just went by me, and it was an odd experience. So, I mean, I personally, I don't know if I could really recommend it to anyone, but other people may be less sensitive to this sort of thing than I am. And I do still intend to read some of his other books, but as for this one, it wasn't for me, and I just had to be honest about that. I hope that people won't be coming to kill me for this opinion or very angry at me, but yeah, I did not love this book. Yeah, so thank you for watching. I hope it wasn't too grumpy of me, and I'll see you with the next review. Thank you.